Welcome to the Deep Dive. Really glad you could join us today, especially for all you dedicated learners, particularly our UPSC aspirants tuning in. This is Essential Current Affairs for June 30th, 2025, and it's part 1. We've got quite a stack of sources today covering India's economy, some key initiatives, and even a few global science updates.
Absolutely. And our mission, as always, is to try and cut through all the noise, pull out the most vital bits of information, and, help you connect those dots. Think of it as a way to get really well informed, but efficiently. And actually, some of these topics might ring a bell. They could be a good revision opportunity, building on things we've touched on before.
Okay, then let's get straight into it.
Yeah.
We're diving into some really crucial reports. First, things impacting everything from, our farms to the nation's financial health. First up, let's talk agriculture. There's a major report out from the National Statistics Office, the NSO. It looks at India's agricultural performance over the last 10 years. And here's where it gets really interesting. A massive surge in gross value added, the GVA. It's up by about 225% at current prices.
Yeah, that's a huge headline number. And the gross value of output, or GVO, that's grown by 54.6% at constant prices, looking back from 2011-12 to 2023-24.
So big growth. What's driving it? Still the traditional sectors?
Oh, yes and no. The crop sector is still the largest contributor, about 54.1% in 2023-24. And you see states like Uttar Pradesh leading in cereal production, with paddy and wheat making up a huge chunk, like 85% of all cereal GVO. But what's also fascinating is the growth in other areas. Look at floriculture. Its GVO has nearly doubled to about 28.1 thousand crore.
Doubled. Wow.
Exactly. It points towards, diversification, potential new income streams, but it also underscores agriculture's foundational role, still contributing around 16% to the country's GDP, supporting nearly half our population.
Okay, so the numbers look impressive in terms of growth. But this raises a question, doesn't it? What about the underlying challenges? Are they still there despite this growth?
That's the critical point. Yes, the growth is there, but the report implicitly points to ongoing issues. Things like relatively low productivity compared to global benchmarks in some areas. Low farmer income is still a major concern. Overexploitation of water resources, especially groundwater. And of course, the ever-present challenge of climate change impacting yields and patterns.
Right.
So this highlights why targeted interventions are still so necessary. The source mentions several, like the Agriculture Investment Fund that's aimed at post-harvest infrastructure, reducing waste. There's the Digital Agriculture Mission, trying to bring tech and data into farming decisions, and PM Matsya Sampada Yojana for fisheries, trying to formalize and boost that sector. These aren't just broad schemes, they're designed to tackle specific identified bottlenecks.
Got it. Okay, shifting gears now. Let's zoom out to the macro economy. An RBI report's out, indicating India's external debt rose. It reached US $736.3 billion by March 2025. That's quite an increase, US $67.5 billion from the previous year. And that's not even counting valuation effects from currency swings.
Yeah. Yes, and the debt to GDP ratio also ticked up slightly to 19.1%.
So what should we take away from this? Is rising external debt always a concern?
Well, it needs careful monitoring. External debt is essentially money borrowed from outside India. The main concerns are, first, exchange rate risk. Since loans are the largest component and over half are in US dollars, if the rupee weakens against the dollar, our repayment costs go up in rupee terms.
Right, that makes sense.
Then there's inflation risk. High debt can sometimes fuel inflation, which can slow growth. And third, there's the crowding out effect. Higher debt servicing costs, paying interest and principal, can mean less government money available for productive investments in things like infrastructure, health, or education. It also puts pressure on our balance of payments. So while the level itself is important, the composition, the currency exposure, and the servicing costs are key things to analyze. For you studying this, understanding these linkages is crucial.
Okay, now let's talk about people, our workforce. A report from the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, MSDE. And this one, it's a bit of an eye-opener. It says approximately 88% of India's workforce is engaged in low-competency occupations. 88%.
Yeah, that's a stark figure. It points to a significant skill mismatch in the economy. You have a situation where some people might be overqualified for the low-skill jobs they're doing, which means their potential isn't fully utilized. And at the same time, you have industries needing higher-skilled workers, but finding it hard to recruit because people lack the necessary qualifications or training.
So what does this mean long-term? For productivity, for growth?
Well, it directly impacts economic productivity. Underused potential holds back innovation, and workers stuck in low-skill, low-wage jobs have limited social mobility. It also limits our ability to fully capitalize on our demographic dividend, that large young population. The report logically recommends a major overhaul of technical and vocational education and training, or TVET.
How so? What kind of revamp?
Things like aligning the training curricula much more closely with what industries actually need now and in the future. Establishing standardized ways to assess skills, so qualifications means something consistent across the board. Getting industry much more involved in designing and delivering training, maybe through incentives, and promoting lifelong learning so people can continuously upskill throughout their careers. This is absolutely critical for building a future-ready workforce.
Definitely sounds crucial. Okay, let's switch to some positive news now. A Meta report highlights India's startup ecosystem. It says it's experiencing exponential growth.
Yes, really dynamic stuff happening there. The report points to a few key drivers. Early-stage funding availability has improved. Digital penetration across the country is obviously a huge factor. And growing consumer affluence, not just in the big metros, but in non-metro regions too.
And the numbers reflect this.
Absolutely. India now ranks third on the Huron Global Unicorn Index for 2025. We have over 150,000 startups recognized by DPIIT, the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade. And get this, 70% of these startups are already integrating AI in some way.
70%, that's high.
It is. And it seems to be paying off. 87% of those using AI reported an improvement in their cost per acquisition in marketing. So they're using tech to become more efficient.
What exactly counts as a startup here? There's a definition, right?
Yeah, the report uses the standard definition. A private limited company, partnership, or LLP that's been around for up to 10 years, with turnover under 100 crore, and focused on innovation or scalability. And this growth isn't just numbers, it's driven by innovative strategies, things like looking at cross-border expansion earlier, building an omni-channel presence online and offline, and really focusing on Tier 2 and Tier 3 markets, not just the big cities.
And the government's role in this, you mentioned DPIIT recognition.
Crucial. Initiatives like Startup India provide the overall framework and visibility. Then you have specific schemes like the Startup India Seed Fund that helps with very early stage funding, getting from a concept to a market-ready product. The Fund of Funds helps channel domestic capital into startups. And the Etzel Innovation Mission is fostering that culture of innovation right from schools and universities. It's a multi-pronged approach trying to support startups at different stages.
Okay, another quick economic indicator, India's current account balance. It recorded a surplus in Q4 of FY25. $13.5 billion, or 1.3% of GDP. And this helped narrow the overall current account deficit for the full financial year. What does that tell us?
A narrowing current account deficit, or even a surplus like in Q4, is generally seen as a positive sign for economic stability. The current account is part of the balance of payments. It tracks the flow of goods, services, income, and transfers between India and the rest of the world. A smaller deficit means we are, relatively speaking, less reliant on foreign capital inflows to finance our consumption and investment. In fact, the Finance Ministry recently described the Indian economy as being in a Goldilocks situation.
Goldilocks, right. Not too hot, not too cold.
Exactly. It describes that kind of ideal economic state: moderate, steady GDP growth, relatively low unemployment, decent corporate earnings, but without runaway inflation or excessively high interest rates. It's seen as a sweet spot, particularly attractive for investors because it suggests stability and sustainable growth.
Okay, good to know. Let's move into governance and social initiatives now. There's a new program from the Ministry of Tribal Affairs called the Adi Karmugi program. What's the goal here?
Adi Karmugi is focused on capacity building right at the grassroots level, specifically in tribal areas. The main objective is to create a large pool, about 20 lakh or 2 million field-level stakeholders who are trained and motivated. They plan to do this by first creating batches of trainers and master trainers who then cascade the training down. The whole idea is to bring about a fundamental shift towards more citizen-centric planning and service delivery in about 1 lakh or 100,000 tribal villages and habitations. It's really about empowering local actors.
Interesting approach. Related to worker welfare, the Employees State Insurance Corporation, ESIC, has approved relaunching its SPEES scheme. What is SPREE?
SPREE stands for Scheme for Promoting Registration of Employers and Employees. It ran before, back in 2016, with some success, registered quite a few employers and over 1 crore employees. The key thing about the relaunch for 2025 is the focus. It's emphasizing voluntary compliance. meaning they're opening a one-time window for employers who haven't registered or who missed registering some employees to come forward voluntarily without facing penalties for past non-compliance. It aligns with that broader push for ease of doing business and reducing litigation, similar to the amnesty scheme 2025 they also approved. And one more thing from ESIC, they've approved a revised ESI-AUSH policy.
AUSH, so traditional medicine.
Exactly. It's a step towards integrating traditional health practices more formally into the ESI system. Specifically, it allows for including yoga therapists and panchakarma attendants in ESIC hospitals, which could broaden the healthcare options available to insured workers.
Okay, let's shift focus to the international stage and the environment. First, a quick note. India's Prime Minister visited Cyprus. Significant because it's the first such visit in 23 years.
Yeah, that gap of 23 years makes it noteworthy. It signals a renewed diplomatic focus on Cyprus, which is strategically located in the eastern Mediterranean. Discussions likely covered strengthening bilateral ties, maybe economic cooperation, and regional stability in an increasingly important geopolitical area.
Now, a much more complex international issue. The Indus Waters Treaty, the IWT. There's been a ruling from the Hague-based Court of Arbitration, the COA. They said India putting the treaty in abeyance doesn't stop the COA from ruling on disputes about the Kishangang and Rattle hydro projects.
Right, this is a very intricate situation. Remember, the IWT was signed way back in 1960, brokered by the World Bank. It allocates the waters of the Indus River system, the eastern rivers, Sutlej, Beas, Ravi, to India, and the western rivers, Indus, Jhelum, Chenab, to Pakistan. Though India has rights to use western river waters for certain non-consumptive uses like hydropower, subject to specific criteria.
And the dispute is about those criteria for these two projects, Kishangang and Rattle.
Precisely. Pakistan raised objections about the design features of these two Indian projects located in Jammu and Kashmir, on tributaries of the Jhelum and Chenab, respectively. But the real complexity now lies in the dispute resolution process itself. Pakistan first asked for a neutral expert, then later demanded a court of arbitration. India insisted a neutral expert was the appropriate mechanism according to the treaty's graded approach.
So two different mechanisms requested.
Exactly. And the World Bank, in a rather unusual move, ended up appointing both a neutral expert on India's request and constituting the Court of Arbitration on Pakistan's request to look into the issues. India has consistently objected to the COA, calling it illegally constituted and a violation of the IWT's graded mechanism. India did not participate in the COA proceedings and rejected this recent award, stating it's exercising its sovereign rights under international law. It highlights the deep disagreements not just on the technical issues, but on the legal process itself.
A very complex diplomatic and legal challenge. Okay, let's look skyward now. The Vera C. Rubin Observatory has released its first images.
Exciting development. This observatory, located in Chile, is specifically designed for a huge project called the Legacy Survey of Space and Time, or LSST. It's a 10-year mission to basically create a massive, deep map of the southern sky, capturing changes over time. Think of like a cosmic movie. And it's named after Vera C. Rubin, the astronomer whose work provided key evidence for the existence of dark matter. So its mission is tied to understanding some of the biggest mysteries in cosmology.
From the cosmos back down to Earth and environmental science, researchers have found bacteria that can break down PFAS. These are the forever chemicals, right? Found in nonstick pans, packaging.
That's right. Per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. They're called forever chemicals because they have incredibly strong carbon-fluorine bonds, making them extremely resistant to breaking down naturally. They're used in so many products: cookware, food packaging, waterproof fabrics, firefighting foam.
I mean, the problem is they just persist.
Exactly. They persist in the environment, soil, water, air, and critically, they bioaccumulate. That means they build up in living organisms, including humans, as they move up the food chain. They're linked to various health concerns. So finding nearly 20 species of bacteria that can actually break these tough chemical bonds is potentially a major breakthrough. It offers a possible biological pathway for cleaning up PFAS contamination.
That could be huge. On a related environmental note, the IB Alliance. They've doubled their investment in biodiversity data between 2023 and 2024. What is IBEAT?
IBT stands for Integrated Biodiversity Assessment Tool. The alliance behind it is a coalition of major conservation organizations: IUCN, UNEP WCMC, BirdLife International, and Conservation International. It's headquartered in the UK. Their core mission is to provide decision makers, especially businesses and financial institutions, with high-quality biodiversity data and tools. They manage key datasets like the World Database on Protected Areas and the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species.
So doubling investment means?
It means more resources to maintain and expand these crucial global datasets. Better data leads to better informed decisions about conservation priorities, about managing risks related to biodiversity loss, and about tracking progress towards global goals. It's vital for effective conservation action worldwide.
Okay. And one last environmental point. Jellyfish in the Cochin backwaters in Kerala. They're seeing seasonal invasions. Why is this significant?
Well, jellyfish themselves are natural marine animals, part of the same group as corals. They drift in the open ocean. But what's concerning are jellyfish blooms, these sudden, massive increases in their population in a particular area. These blooms are often seen as a symptom of an ecosystem under stress.
What kind of stress?
Several factors can contribute. Warmer sea surface temperatures, often linked to climate change, can favor jellyfish reproduction. Eutrophication, that's excess nutrients in the water, usually from sewage or agricultural runoff, can fuel the growth of organisms jellyfish feed on. And overfishing can remove the jellyfish's natural predators or competitors for food. Pollution can also play a role. So seeing these blooms in the Cochin backwaters likely reflects a combination of these pressures, signaling broader ecological imbalances in that system.
A kind of indicator species, in a way. Okay, finally, let's wrap up with culture. Today marks the auspicious occasion of Lord Jagannath's Rath Yatra. The Prime Minister extended greetings. Can you tell us a bit about this festival?
Yes, the Rath Yatra, primarily celebrated in Puri, Odisha, is one of the major annual Hindu festivals. It's a truly spectacular event. It marks the ceremonial journey of Lord Jagannath, his brother Lord Balabhadra, and sister Devi Subhadra, from their main home, the Jagannath Temple, to the Gundicha Temple, which is considered their aunt's home. This journey starts on the second day of the bright fortnight of the Asada month in the Hindu calendar. The deities travel on huge, elaborately decorated chariots or raths, pulled by thousands of devotees. The return journey, called the Bahuda Yatra, takes place about a week later. It's a massive expression of faith and culture.
Sounds incredible. And that brings us to the end of part 1 of our June 30th, 2025 Current Affairs Deep Dive. We've covered a lot: agriculture, economic indicators, debt, skills, startups, social programs, international issues, science, environment, and culture.
We have. And the goal, as always, was to give you those essential insights, helping you not just see the headlines, but understand the context and the connections between these different areas. Which perhaps raises a final question for you to think about. How do all these pieces from, say, the skills gap impacting our economic potential, to international water treaties under strain, to bacteria that might forever chemicals, how do they all fit together? How do they interact to shape the bigger picture for India?
A great question to ponder. We certainly hope this deep dive gave you plenty to think about and helped you feel more informed for your preparations. If you found this useful, please do consider liking and subscribing so you don't miss our next deep dive. Until then, keep digging for knowledge.